for episode... Is this episode 7?
I think so.
Lucky number 7.
Oh, yeah. 7 is considered a lucky number.
7 is like the lucky number.
Yeah.
You go to any casino.
Yeah.
And 777, that's jackpot.
What's so weird is I have 13 ingrained in my mind as like lucky number.
Yeah. That was my number growing up. Was like in soccer and then Taylor Swift. And
yeah. But what's funny
for
is
you, it's probably Taylor Swift. But 13 is traditionally an unlucky number. Yeah, a lot of hotels don't have the 13th floor, which I think is so funny that people have been buying into that superstition for so long that they'll go 12 to 14.
Yeah, I like that.
I wonder if 12 is in some hotels, if it's like 2 floors. You know what I mean? Like if it's the ceilings are a little bit higher and those are like the nicer rooms. If any hotel takes advantage of that, or if they just say, nope, no.
Yeah, I'm sure
it's just a standard floor.
I'm sure that floor 13 is secretly disguised as floor 14.
Do you think that came from like the elevator? You know, the elevator companies were like, we're not putting the 13th button in. We don't have a 13 number manufacturer. Mm-hmm. And then hotels went along with it? Or was it like hotels were like, there's no way, 13th floor, that's where the bad stuff happens?
Yeah, like who's the one that's really... Yeah.
Yeah, chicken or the egg? The elevator or the hotel?
This is random, but in Luigi's Mansion... Yeah. Isn't there no floor 13 in that?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good touch.
Very accurate game.
Yeah.
What an intro. Welcome, everybody, for episode 7 of Lowering the Barrier. I'm Alex.
And I'm Matti.
And today we are talking about how to crush a fat loss diet. We had a few working titles. One of those, let's see, in order, it was how to make a fat loss phase suck less.
Which is very apt.
Well, that's for what?
Spot on.
Spot on, but it felt like so wordy.
Yeah.
And people love numbers. People love lists. So next I went to Hunger Management 101 because we have this 101 naming convention. We did Fat Loss 101, Creatine 101. And so this one could be Hunger Management 101. Yeah. But I didn't think that was sexy enough. You know, hunger management, people don't understand how important this episode is going to be.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of fat loss approaches.
Yes.
It is so much more important than just hunger management. And I don't think people put enough stock into how important hunger management is.
And I also want to say I'm on the opposite side of the spectrum, not to plug pregnancy again.
Yeah.
I am not currently trying to lose weight, and I am still using a lot of hunger management strategies. Yeah. So this isn't just a weight loss, obviously.
Weight loss, also weight management, and just like not letting yourself get out of control with your calorie intake.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of take-home tips here.
Yeah.
So the title that I think we landed on personally is 7 tips to crush a diet. Actually, no, that's it. 7 tips to crush a diet. I think that is just like, you know, it's list based. People want to hear all 7. So we're kind of hooking them in a little bit. And 7 tips, the 7th episode.
Oh, cute.
Lucky. I mean, it's just like
cute.
It was written in the stars.
Should you go to the casino?
No, I'm not going to do that.
We're not really gamblers.
We're not gamblers, no. Although I think pretty much, I would say I definitely have a net positive in terms of gambling. Like I guarantee that actually. But I mean, we're not talking like
thousands of dollars.
No, we're talking like $200 maybe, you know?
I've only been to the casino like 4 times in my life.
Yeah. I used to play poker with my friends sometimes. Is that illegal to like... Then we wouldn't do it for money, let's just say, on this recorded medium. It was for fun. And anyway, I mean, it was like...
But yeah, I actually
if it was fake money, let's say we were using Monopoly money, because again, I don't know the legality of this, and I'm not about to incriminate myself. So let's just say we were using Monopoly. We were using like $5 of Monopoly money. You know, it wasn't like anything crazy. It was in high school. We had... Yeah. You definitely can't gamble when you're under 18, so...
It somehow just kept getting worse.
Yeah. But anyways, it was fake money, right? So it doesn't matter. And then, casino a handful of times, you know, but nothing crazy there.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I think I've gone to a casino 6 times total in my life.
Very few times.
Yeah. And then I bet on Derek Lewis. I bet that people had Derek Lewis beating Daniel Cormier. Those were tight odds. This is in UFC.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. And I love Derek Lewis.
And so I put like $10 or $20 or something on Daniel Cormier. but it was like this one, I'm not a sports bettor, but it was this one app where you can like set a lineup, of people, and my lineup just crushed it. Mm-hmm. And so I won like $350, and then I used that to gamble all the way down to $100.
Yeah.
Lost 250 of it. But I mean, it was like,
you were up.
Yeah, I was still up from 10 to 350 and then down to 100. And at 100, I was like, let's just cash it out. That way I'm up 90.
Yeah.
In the end of things. So yeah, what an illustrious gambling career to start this episode. So real quick, let's get the plugs going. So you do not have any paid products, but I do. And so if you would like to support the podcast, one way to do that would be to join the A-Team, which is my group training program. There are 4 workouts per week. Cycles update every 6 weeks. And at the time this podcast is posted, which would be Tuesday the 13th, another lucky number. Crazy.
How crazy.
February 13th of 2024. We will be in the 5th week, I believe. Yeah, 5th week of the cycle. And so next week would be the 6th week. And then the week after that would be the 1st, which is the best time to join, in my opinion, because everybody's kind of on the same page. A lot of new movements, forum videos in the chat. I look over and review every single one. So that's a good time to join, but you can join anytime you want, and there's a 7-day free trial. Forward Forever. Registration is open.
Yeah.
This week, February 11th, it opened, and it will be open until the 18th. And then we begin on the 19th. This cycle is going to be crazy. We have a $1,000 giveaway for new entrants, and then actually another $1,000 for our current members. So yeah, and that's just, Danielle and I have been posting details on that on our Instagram. But the crux of it is we just want to find somebody who has the best transformation. That doesn't mean like progress photos. We're not looking for the craziest before and after, who lost the most weight, who gained the most muscle, or anything like that. We are looking for who had the most transformative experience in 6 weeks with this. Like, how did this impact your life? How did this impact your family's life? How did it change your trajectory of your health? That is what we were looking for. So progress photos are not necessary. You can send them in by all means, but yeah, anybody who signs up in this next cycle will be eligible for $1,000. And if you're a current member, you're also eligible for another $1,000. I shouldn't say another, but yeah, it's like separate.
You can't double dip.
No, you can't double dip. It's separate. And then we also have a Valentine's Day special going on, which is a lot of fun. Happy Valentine's Day to all of you who are listening to this on the 13th. Happy Valentine's Day tomorrow. We love you. I mean, it's just a nice thing to say. And anyways, the Valentine's Day deal with Forward Forever is buy one, get one, 50% off. So if you and a friend, a partner, a loved one, whoever it is, join, instead of paying $200 each, one of you pays $200, the other pays $100. But maybe you can kind of split that 50-50 and do $150 each. But that's not up to me. That's up to you to decide. If you want to follow us on Instagram, if you're not already, you can follow me at AlexTimmyFitness.
Or me at Meals with Matti.
And if you want a non-monetary way to support us, well, Instagram is one. But then please also, if you enjoy this episode especially, please give us a 5-star rating. And if you're currently listening, screenshot and share on your Instagram story and tag us. We absolutely love when you do that. Okay. Is there anything you want to talk about before we get the podcast started? Anything you're reading, anything you're watching, anything that has nothing to do with what we're about to talk about?
I don't think so. I mean, it is Super Bowl Sunday.
Super Bowl Sunday. So yeah. Who are you rooting for?
That's exciting. The Chiefs.
You're rooting for the Chiefs.
And I just want to say, before people call me a bandwagon fan.
Yeah, sure.
Because of the Taylor Swift effect.
Yep.
And I love Taylor Swift. I did live in Kansas. The Chiefs have always been my team.
How long did you live in Kansas?
About 1.5 years.
Okay, 1.5 years.
Yeah. Maybe 2 years.
Maybe 2 years. All right. Yeah. So she is a diehard Kansas City Chiefs fan. She has definitely been watching them from the beginning. She could name more than 3 players. We're not going to quiz her, but she could name 3 players, and she could name 3 players that are not Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. That much we know. We're not going to test her on that because that would be rude.
It would be rude to put me on the spot like that.
Well, we just don't need to because we know how diehard of a fan you are.
But the Chiefs are the only NFL game I've ever been to, which I think counts for something.
That does. We should probably get to a Lions game next season. That'd be a lot of fun.
That would be fun.
Our dog is walking over to the door, and if he needs to pee, that would be... Nope. he just wants attention.
He's just checking it out.
He just wants attention. If he showed up on the camera, I can't tell if he did or not, but yeah, he kind of did. So if you're on video, there he is. Okay, for me, what have I been doing lately? Chess, a whole lot of chess.
A lot of chess.
Trackmania. Mm-hmm. Shout out Greg Knuckles, my bestie, my best friend in the entire world, Greg Knuckles, for introducing me to Trackmania. He doesn't necessarily know we're best friends, but I'm working on it. And if you don't know who Greg Knuckles is, he's a really big deal in our industry. And so, yeah, we played Trackmania twice together. It was one of the highlights of my year. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
Literally.
Absolutely.
I mean, literally, actually, one of the highlights of my year. And I told him that. He was cool about it, But, yeah, chess, Trackmania, and we're watching Better Call Saul. We're finally getting around to that. I mean, it's not a new show. It's been out for years, but we're finally getting around to it. So, okay, ready to get into today's episode?
I would love to.
Let's do it. So today we are talking about hunger management, and to get that started, we kind of have to understand what is hunger. And that's actually a broad question that I was almost struggling to succinctly put. Mm-hmm. So I turned to modern marvel, AI, ChatGPT specifically, ChatGPT 4.0 specifically. And so I asked just simply the question, what is hunger? And here's what it said. Hunger is a sensation experienced when one feels the physiological need to eat food. It is typically initiated by the body's energy needs and is a critical, natural signal that prompts animals, including humans, to consume nutrients necessary for survival. Hunger is regulated by a complex interaction of the digestive system, hormones, and the brain. When the stomach is empty, it releases the hormone ghrelin, which signals the hypothalamus in the brain to induce the sensation of hunger. After eating, the stomach and intestines digest food and absorb nutrients, leading to a rise in blood sugar levels and the release of other hormones like insulin and leptin, which signal the brain that the body is satiated, reducing the feeling of hunger. Chronic hunger or undernourishment can lead to malnutrition, weakened immune system, and various health problems. On a global scale, hunger is a critical issue, often exacerbated by factors such as poverty, conflict, and famine, and is a key focus of international development and humanitarian efforts. And it's like, wow, ChatGPT was going for the character limit. ChatGPT was trying to fluff up this essay.
Yeah.
It didn't have to do all that. And so I said, please explain it to me like I'm 5 years old with no more than 2 sentences. You want to read this one?
Yeah, this one's really solid. Hunger is when your tummy feels empty and tells you it's time to eat something yummy. It's your body's way of saying it needs food to keep playing and growing.
And so I think that's the official definition that we're going to rock with.
I love that one.
It's when your tummy feels empty and it's time to eat something yummy.
That's exactly what it is.
And so I think most of us, if I were to ask hunger, I think if I were to ask the audience, I think a lot of people would get a very, very spot on definition, not a perfect definition, but they would say, it's your body telling you that you need to eat something.
Sure.
That's pretty straightforward. Mm-hmm. And the next part of this that I want to dive into is that hunger is not a linear scale. Mm-hmm. And that's really important to know for, we're setting the scene for the practical tips that we're going to get into later in this episode. But we do need to kind of have this understanding of what hunger is and how it affects us and what we should do about it. And understanding that it is not a linear scale can be a very freeing thing. Mm-hmm. For a lot of people, they see, one of my favorite things that I asked a client was, do you see hunger as a problem that you need to solve? And I'm not kidding, it stumped her. She said, she said, what an interesting question. Do I see hunger as a problem I need to solve? She said, I've never really thought of it that way. And she said, I don't necessarily see hunger as a problem I need to solve, but it is a sensation. And I guess that does drive me to do something about it. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there was any one answer that I was necessarily looking for. This isn't a pass or fail, like a math test where you're answering, 1 + 1 = 2. And if you answer 3, that's wrong. This was kind of an open-ended thing that I kind of wanted. I just wanted to see the psychology of her thought process around hunger. And backtracking a little bit, hunger isn't linear. And when I say that, how many of us have experienced when you are, maybe you're out, maybe you just don't have access to food, and you start getting hungrier and hungrier and hungrier. And as time goes by, you start to get hungrier up until that point. And then there's a certain point where you start to not feel so hungry anymore. Mm-hmm. It almost goes away. And so hunger is a sensation where it doesn't just continuously grow and get more and more and more intense. It does kind of hit this top point where it will start to draw back a little bit. So if you are feeling overly hungry, I'm not saying ignore that. That is something that I don't really ascribe to, is the belief that you should ever ignore hunger signals. But when you are in a fat loss phase, hunger is going to be a reality.
Right. And I think before we get too far into some of this, I think we should also kind of mention, like, we're not saying that you should let yourself get super, super hungry in the name of fat loss. Yeah. We're trying to give you strategies of how you can alleviate that sensation of getting to the point where you feel really, really hungry, or how you can kind of navigate that. Because there's definitely, like you said, levels to it, of like some hunger kind of just goes away. Yep. And then there's levels where it's like, you probably need to eat something. Yeah. Yeah. So I just want to throw the caveat of, like, we're not giving you the advice of, like, you should learn to ignore every hunger signal. Like, those are there for a reason. They're sometimes.
Reason. Yeah. And I would look at hunger on a spectrum of 1 to 10, or a scale of 1 to 10. And 1, let's say 1 is you're not hungry at all. In fact, you're stuffed, and it's after Thanksgiving, and you just ate everything. And not only is your normal stomach full, but your dessert stomach is also full. Mm-hmm. And those who know that those are 2 separate stomachs. Right. Physiologically, not literally. If you don't know what I'm talking about, this is just a joke. I'm thinking maybe if somebody's foreign and is like, whoa, Americans have 2 stomachs, that's why they're so fat. Like, that's not. That's not what I'm saying. But anyway, look at hunger on a scale from 1 to 10. 1, you're stuffed. 10, you are absolutely ravenous. Try to sit somewhere in like a 4 to 6. If you start getting to a 6 and you're starting to get really, really hungry, don't let it go to a 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. Especially not 8, 9, 10, because then you're going to probably be more likely to overeat. And then on the other side of things, if you are working on fat loss, dude, don't be stuffed. Eat to the point where you're satiated, not stuffed. And there is a massive difference there. Right. And we're going to talk about some practical tips to get to that satiated point without getting stuffed. But a spoiler real quick, one of the biggest things with it is just time, slowing down your time to eat. But again, we'll talk about this stuff in a little bit. When we're talking about hunger and satiety, 2 hormones that you may have heard, dear listener, or maybe not, but two words that will come up very often are hormones called ghrelin and leptin. And these can be thought of as the hunger and satiety hormones, respectively. So ghrelin relates to hunger and leptin relates to satiety. And there is a lot of very science-heavy stuff, but let's just keep it real basic. Ghrelin, hunger. If you haven't eaten in a while, it contributes to that hungry feeling. And then leptin, satiety. If you've eaten, the body will produce more leptin or release more leptin, and that will contribute to you feeling full.
I had no idea that's where the H went in ghrelin.
Crazy.
I always thought it was GREHLIN. Yeah.
Right. It doesn't.
I thought this was a different word.
Doesn't it look nuts? Yeah. So for those who can't see this,
if you ever need to Google ghrelin,
it's GHRELIN. Not that, why would somebody need to? But if they spelled it any other way, they'd probably get to their thing pretty quick. Google autocorrect and did you mean ghrelin? You'd be like, oh, I guess so. Yeah.
Like, I have no idea.
Fun fact: the stomach rumbling that I'm sure all of us have felt is called borborygmus.
Yeah, mine might start soon.
And if you have plural of borborygmus, it is borborygmi.
What would be the plural of stomach rumbling? Like, what is the plural experience of that?
Well, you just have, I have a case of borborygmi. That's it.
Yeah.
There's no other, you got a lot of borborygmi going on right now. I don't know what other way you would say it, but I think that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So borborygmus or borborygmi, stomach rumbling. You can now throw that out. If you hear somebody, actually, we were at the funeral yesterday and it was very quiet. Did you hear the stomach rumbling behind us?
No.
Somebody hadn't eaten that morning and I noticed it and I didn't know the name of it. And that's what actually caused me later that day to look up what is the name of stomach rumbling. There's got to be a fancy name for it. And sure enough, borborygmus.
There's nothing. Well, I shouldn't say nothing. That's so dramatic. But there's something very embarrassing.
Are you gonna say there's nothing more embarrassing? Shitting your pants.
I reeled it back real fast. Okay.
I could probably on the fly think of a dozen things that are more embarrassing than my stomach rumbling.
But like in a really quiet situation. Like if you were at, I went to Catholic school growing up. So if you were in mass,
you could have a funeral, your alarm go off that screams, "It's time." You could have that happen to you. That alerts the alarm owner that it is time to update the training programs of their group training program, the A-team.
Yeah. When that went off, my first thought was I accidentally lied to your mom because she asked me if you put your phone on silent and I said yes.
Yeah. That was, luckily I was so quick with it.
You were really quick.
I was so quick with it.
It wasn't that loud.
It wasn't that loud. It wasn't the quietest part.
No.
Just nobody was, a lot of people weren't overlooking. My sister hit me on the arm, but that's about it. So,
but it's a funny alarm to go off. Like it couldn't have just been the standard.
Right. It should have,
It's time.
It's time. And that's Bruce Buffer's intro for the UFC. I just think it's a good alarm sound. I mean, it's a great alarm sound.
Yeah, for
sure. I love it for when I'm grilling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so fun.
It's really
fun. Great sound. Yeah. All right. Back to the hunger talk. It's important to differentiate between actual physical hunger and emotional eating. I think a lot of times, how many times, have we been bored? Not just like anybody listening, not just you and me, but anybody listening. Have we been bored and we go over to the fridge and just open it up and look inside? I feel like that is a muscle memory in and of itself. You just open it up. Nothing really looks good. Shut it. Go to the pantry.
Do the same thing.
Rice Krispie treat, granola bar, something. And it's like, you're not really hungry. You're just kind of looking for some kind of small dopamine rush that food gives us, which is great, but not conducive to fat loss at all.
Sure. Yeah.
So I would, if I were you, I would be trying to focus in on actually asking yourself before you eat anything, am I actually hungry?
Yeah.
And you don't have to do this. Like, dude, you don't have to be super anal about this and be like really worried. You go out to a restaurant. Am I actually hungry or am I just bored? No, you're just there to eat something. It's a fun time.
Right.
This doesn't have to be this super black and white rule. But if you are pursuing fat loss, that is the time where I would lock in. And that is the time where I would be thinking, okay, am I actually hungry?
Definitely.
I would be having those mental check-ins.
Definitely. And one strategy, if you are someone who kind of deals with that sort of emotional eating, or if you're like me and you're just kind of a snacky person, keeping like cut fruit or something that you
frozen grapes. You love
frozen grapes are a great one for me personally.
Yeah.
I don't know. Not everyone probably likes that texture, but I think that can be really helpful. Just having something that's
easy to eat.
Yes, thank you.
Filling. Yeah.
My mind went blank.
Pregnancy brain.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, we can finally tell people that,
the
reason you're just blanking isn't because you didn't sleep that well. Well, I mean, that'll probably come in the third trimester.
Oh, it's already happened.
Yeah. 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 All right. Next up, we have some nutritional strategies. And actually, before we move on to that, we will in just a moment, but I do want to say, and I added this in here, and I do mean this, hunger is, I'm going to look into the camera for this one. So if you are not currently in the app and you're on Spotify or YouTube, go ahead and open it up so I can stare into your soul. Hunger is the single most important thing to nail in a calorie deficit, in my opinion. If you do not nail hunger, this is going to be a short-term thing. Yes, somebody can lose weight, not body fat. There's a difference here. Well, body fat too, sure. But somebody can lose weight and body fat eating cheesecake and Twinkies and cheeseburgers and pizza. Absolutely, you can do that. But you will be hungrier because those are very calorie-dense foods. And if you do not nail hunger, you're not going to be able to stick to this for too long. It is a physical sensation, but it is one that is very hard to beat. So if you want to be successful with fat loss, you need to nail hunger. And if you want to be successful with weight maintenance in the long run, you need to nail hunger. Okay, the eye contact is over.
Yeah, that was good.
I wonder if anybody was like, whoa, that was intense. Or if the listeners on Apple are just like, oh, man. I wish I could have seen that. We'll go to YouTube for just like that clip. that quick moment. You don't have to do that. That's fine. All right. Next up, let's talk about some nutritional strategies. And again, I do want to remind you that we will have all these practical tips, these 7 practical tips listed very succinctly closer to the end. But we're kind of just talking about different aspects of hunger and how to manage it. But the practical tips, that the takeaways, will be listed out at the end. So you don't have to write these down necessarily yet. All right. Some nutritional strategies. Just like Matti just mentioned, it's very important that you prioritize high volume and low calorie foods. So when we say that, it is not like, oh, I need to eat low calorie everything. You know,
Right.
there's this push to make everything low calorie and high protein.
Yeah.
And the expense of that oftentimes is flavor. And so you can just start to hate your diet. And Matti, you're passionate about this.
I am. I think that there's this huge belief. I think that there's this huge belief that macro-friendly food has to be just bland and boring. And like you have to eat chicken and rice and a broccoli every day. And I think that that makes fat loss miserable. Maybe that's a strong take. But I think that that belief is just not conducive to like a really successful weight loss plan. And I think that we can have a lot of fun with food and still be in that calorie deficit.
And shameless plug, that's what you do on Meals with
Yeah,
Matti.
that's the goal of Meals with Matti, is sharing meals and snacks.
Easy to make a lot of times.
Yeah,
you know,
that taste really good. You know,
cook or no cook meals that are quick to make or easy to make, and
definitely
very calorie conscious, so that somebody's not.
Yeah,
you know, I think so many recipes out there are like, they look awesome, but it might be 1,000 calories.
Right. And I'm not saying you can't enjoy things like that. You know, we definitely have some meals that are higher calorie, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
But I think that you can find a lot of meals that are delicious in that 300 to 500 calorie range that still get you your protein goal
and still satiate you.
Yes. And, you know, we don't shy away from like butter and cream and things like that. We're just really mindful of the way that we're including them in order to make our food taste good.
Yeah. And I think it's really important. You know, you had mentioned that, you know, the standard, the bodybuilder of old was eating, like the gym goer of old was eating white rice, broccoli, and chicken breast. And that was like the staple. And I think that's what a lot of people, even still, because I hear this, still they think that's what they have to eat. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And that would be so contraindicated for successful fat loss and weight maintenance in the long run, because the way that you eat in a fat loss phase should very closely mirror what you eat at weight maintenance. They should be very, very, very similar, but maybe adding in some smart swaps, you know, like a lower calorie tortilla, like a carb smart tortilla, which is just pumped with a little bit more fiber. I don't know, like we do bunless burgers sometimes, you know, to cut out, instead of, when I still get Chipotle and Qdoba when I'm in a fat loss phase, but instead of, I cut out the tortilla, because the tortilla is 300 to 300 and I think 340 at, I could be getting these numbers mixed up, but I think it's 340 at Qdoba and around like 380 or maybe 300, something like that at Chipotle. That's 300 calories just for the container of the content.
And the tortilla is not
it's not satiating.
No.
It's not like that much more satiating.
Right.
Yeah. So that's going to be something that's really important, is just make your diet enjoyable, because this needs to be, especially if you have a lot of weight to lose, this isn't like a short-term pursuit where, oh, I need to have my fat loss foods and then I can go back to my real life foods. Right. No. You need to find a blend of both of those things.
Yes.
You need to be able to merge the foods that you love, and while adding in, I don't like subtracting, adding in higher satiety foods, you know, like more fruits, like more vegetables, like lean proteins, and just try to make smart swaps. It should also be noted that protein is very important. I'm sure most of the listeners know that protein is very important for muscle growth and satiety, so I'm not going to beat that one to death. I'm sure we talked about that. Yeah, we talked about that quite a bit in episode 3 on how to optimize muscle growth. And then I'm sure I talked about that a decent bit on Fat Loss 101, which was our first episode. But yeah, protein, very, very important. The very quick version is it has a higher thermic effect, meaning it takes more calories or more energy to process and digest than carbs and fats do. Carbs and fats about 5 to 10% thermic effect, whereas protein 30% thermic effect, so very significant. It also is very important that you try to preserve as much muscle as possible when you are losing weight. So when we're in a weight loss, and you're going to hear me say weight loss versus fat loss. These are two different things, because when we lose weight, we're losing a proportion of both body fat and lean mass or muscle. And we want to maintain or even gain lean mass, because if we don't, let's say somebody does a crash diet, they try to lose weight as fast as possible. And maybe they're not eating as much protein. Maybe they're not lifting weights. Like, this is a recipe for disaster, because they're going to lose a higher proportion of lean mass. The body doesn't like that. The body wants to get that back. It will fight to get that back. And so let's say on the other side of things, when you're air quote done with your weight loss, you've hit your goal, you're going to notice that if you've lost extra lean mass, you're going to notice that you're going to be a little bit more hungry than you were before, because the body wants that lean mass back. So it'll upregulate your hunger in order to, because again, when we gain or when we lose, it is a proportion of both body fat and lean mass, but it is not going to be 1-to-1 in the terms of when we lose it and when we gain it. So if you're losing at a faster rate, you're not eating enough protein, you're not lifting weights, you will lose a higher proportion of lean mass. And then when we gain it back, we will always, unless you're on anabolic steroids or something like that, you will always gain more body fat than lean mass. So this yo-yo dieting is this crazy vicious cycle of like, okay, we lose weight, but it's more lean mass. Then we gain weight and it's more body fat. So maybe we end up the same weight. We drop 20, then gain 20, but we've actually gained more body fat and lost lean mass. Our body composition is worse. So if this is somebody that, or if this has been you in the past, just don't do that anymore. You got to lift weights. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. You don't got to be in the gym for 6 days a week.
Right.
You can do very little. And we do actually have a episode on that plan, like what's the least you can do with seeing still measurable gains. So that'll be in the upcoming weeks, but very important. Protein and lifting during fat loss. You should always be doing that for optimal health, but especially during fat loss, it's very, very important. Next, fiber. I don't think we should probably do an entire episode on fiber. Do you actually want to write that down to just do a fiber episode?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you. But yeah, fiber, very, very important. It's often highly satiating. So, your fruits, your veggies, your oats, your seeds, all these kinds of things, your legumes, all these kinds of things are very satiating and has a great effect on digestion. So just, try to get a varied diet in there and include plenty of fruits and veggies. Ideally, at every single meal, you have a fruit or a veggie.
Yeah.
That'll really help. A good fiber target is 14 grams per 1,000 calories eaten. So if you're eating 2,000 calories a day, 28 grams of fiber. And I should say a fiber or a protein target, just 0.8 grams per pound of body weight is a great target. If you have 30 or more pounds to lose, roughly, just a rough target, use goal body weight instead for that equation. And then the other part of nutritional strategies that immediately come to mind are hydration. It's very easy to confuse dehydration or thirst with hunger. And so just make sure that you're being relatively hydrated. And I don't think that you need to do, there are these kind of rules out there, like you need to have body weight in ounces, or half your body weight in ounces is a very, very common one. But I think half your body weight in ounces is a good starting point, but I wouldn't hold on to hydration rules as tightly as I would with protein or fiber. Now fiber can be like, you could probably do more. Some people might have GI distress at that specific target. So there is a little bit of flexibility there. And protein, we should think of that as probably a minimum for muscle growth and muscle maintenance, but you could potentially do more than that. And we do actually talk about that pretty early on in the How to Optimize Muscle Growth episode 3, like the protein intakes for fat loss and maintenance and a surplus, calorie surplus. But it's very important that you try to stay hydrated and really monitor. Don't worry too much about like, I need to hit this many ounces. Instead, just monitor your thirst and your urine. If your urine is clear or slightly yellow, you're all good. If it is moderately to dark yellow, you need to drink significant more water. And some people, interestingly enough, feel or have been told that only water counts toward hydration. But while caffeine is a slight diuretic, meaning it makes you pee more, it does still contain a lot of water, so it will still hydrate you. Now, don't get carried away with that, because you don't want to have too much caffeine, because that can, increase your heart rate to an obscene amount. It's a good idea to not get too carried away with caffeine, which again, we will talk about a little bit later. Next up, let's talk about meal timing and frequency. There was this Instagram account that I saw the other day, over 10 million followers.
Wow.
Yeah, it's one of those that just kind of shares like news articles and stuff like that. And it said that new study or new data shows the best way to lose weight is, or optimal health or something like that, is to eat 10 plus meals per day. What?
Oh my God, I gasped.
Yeah, what? Yeah. So I go to the comments to see if, I want to kind of get the crowd vibe. You know what I mean? And sure enough, a lot of the people I follow, like Lane Norton, for example, Alan Aragon, other people like that, are in there saying, this is ridiculous. Like, this is not true. Where are you pulling this from? They didn't share a study or anything like that. Yeah. This is just something I think they just pulled out of nowhere. So at the end of the day, calories are the thing that matters for weight loss. If you are not losing weight, you are not in a calorie deficit. If you are losing weight, you are in a calorie deficit. If you are gaining weight, you are in a calorie surplus. If you're not gaining weight, you are not in a calorie surplus. It cannot be easier than this. Calories in versus calories out. It is that simple. There's nothing that's broken with your metabolism. There is not you are not broken. You like people, there are a lot of these nutrition coaches out there, so frustrating, that say that, oh, you've been dieting too long, so you need to do a reverse diet. And we should do an episode on reverse dieting, but honestly, I could make a succinct point about it right now. You are not going to rev up your metabolism by incrementally increasing your calories. That does not happen. As soon as you move, there is a degree of metabolic adaptation that you will experience based on your calorie intake. So, if somebody maintains at, let's say, 2,000 calories, they start eating 1,800, maybe their calorie expenditure goes down to 1,900, for example, or maybe even 1,800. And so they may feel like, oh, wow, my metabolism is working against me. Well, of course it is, but that's an evolutionary mechanic that allowed us to survive in times that we had less
access to food.
Yes, exactly. Then our body would bring down our energy expenditure.
Right.
That's great. That is very beneficial for our survival. Anyway, not to get on too much of a tangent, I could really talk about that though. And we do have a metabolic adaptation episode planned where I will be talking about that ad nauseum. Okay, meal timing and frequency. So there was a study that I read on this, and I'm going to cover a few studies, but in the next few parts of this episode, but they will be from here on out all posted as long as I can remember. All of these will be posted with links, titles and links in the show notes. So if you're ever curious, they'll be down there. As again, fingers crossed as long as I remember. But this study, 1992 study called The Role of Breakfast in the Treatment of Obesity, a randomized clinical trial. So clinical trial, which is important. It's not just like, they're not just looking at people like observational. It's not just they're filling out quizzes or, whatever, surveys. So it was a 12-week trial, and there were two groups of people. They were either split up into a no breakfast group, which they did 2 meals per day, or a breakfast group where they ate 3 meals per day. And energy intake was identical for both groups. Groups were further classified or stratified by baseline breakfast eating habits. When they came in, did they eat breakfast or not? So then we had this kind of like 4-part sort of like matrix of the clinical trial group who was not eating breakfast and was eating breakfast. And then compared to both of those groups, how are the people who came in not eating breakfast and did eat breakfast, how are they doing? So all 4 groups lost weight. This was expected because, again, energy intake was identical. But the people who lost the most weight were the ones who changed their habits. And they went from going from breakfast to not eating breakfast, or going from not eating breakfast to yes, eating breakfast. And what's really important here is that it showed that it doesn't matter whether you eat breakfast or not. What it shows, there isn't like one best way. It's very commonly said like, oh, you have to eat breakfast because this is, and I do generally agree with that statement that if you skip breakfast, you will be hungrier later in the day. And what a lot of times our breakfast, they can be structured. They can be planned. They can be, when they're usually lower calorie things on average. I'm really talking averages here. You could eat like sausage and bacon, which is very high calorie, but a lot of times it's like people are trying to look for a higher protein, breakfast. So Greek yogurt or some kind of fruits or, eggs, things like this. And but there isn't one best way. And so, and also don't feel like you have to be like, oh, I am currently eating breakfast. Alex said that the best way to lose weight is to switch that to not eat breakfast. Don't do that. That's not my point here. I will say though, for the people who are considering like, okay, maybe I'll try skipping breakfast, I wouldn't do that. Personally, I don't love long bouts of intermittent fasting for a lot of reasons. You are teaching yourself to ignore your hunger cues. That's a big one that I don't like. But probably the most important one for me that I think is very undervalued is you are going through a longer fasting period. Obviously, that's in the name. And so what that means is you are going to be in an extended period of muscle protein breakdown. Now, if you're not familiar with muscle protein synthesis and muscle protein breakdown, these are things that are constantly happening in our bodies. And if we have higher degrees of higher rates of muscle protein synthesis than muscle protein breakdown, then we are in a net positive turnover and muscle protein balance. So we will grow muscle. If the opposite is true, then we will lose muscle. And so if we're spending more time in this muscle protein breakdown because we are not eating, and especially if we're not eating protein, that is just not going to be favorable for muscle growth. And I think this matters quite a bit more as we age and anabolic resistance starts happening, where people who are a bit older start needing more protein because their body, their stomach. Oh man, I was just reading about this the other day, but I'm going to probably butcher this. So please don't just like treat this as a fact, but it's something like, I think it's that the stomach absorbs less of the protein, I think, as we get older. But again, I'm sorry if I'm not saying that correctly, but all that is to say is don't feel like intermittent fasting is the best way, that skipping breakfast is the best way, that eating breakfast is the best way. This is a very personal approach. There is no one best way. Also, important to say that more meals won't stoke your metabolism. That is a very common
What do you
myth.
mean by that?
I mean that eating 6 times per day is not better than eating 3 times per day. It won't increase your energy expenditure just by eating more, because a lot of people say like smaller frequent meals is better because, you know, for hand wavy reasons, whatever they say. I don't know what somebody could make up.
Sure.
But
anecdotally, I do personally enjoy smaller, more frequent meals solely from the perspective of I don't let myself get to that hunger point. You know, like you're able to kind of alleviate some of those hunger cues.
Yeah.
So I actually think that that's something that can be useful, but I definitely wasn't thinking it's like I understand. So, that's why I asked, like, what do you mean by that?
And so it's like, again, this is just to say that like 3 meals isn't going to be significantly better than 4 meals necessarily. You know what I mean? And vice versa. So, and certainly 10 meals is just, we're getting on the point of ridiculousness here. I mean, it's just silly to think that. And so I would say that my one rebuttal against somebody who is eating, let's say somebody really enjoys eating 10 meals.
Sure.
I'm not going to say don't do that, but I would say that maybe we try, you know, would you be interested in trying, I would ask them, would you be interested in trying less meals and just bulking them up a little bit, make them a little bit bigger, so that we look back on the satiety scale of 1 to 10, instead of pushing it up the satiety scale by 1 point or 2 points, we eat a big meal, maybe we can make that push for 4 or 5 points.
Right. Know? Yeah. I mean, at 10 meals, you're
you're eating around the clock. You're not stopping.
You're in the kitchen all day.
Yeah, you wouldn't. That'd be ridiculous.
Yeah, one kind of like practical strategy on this though is if you do have like a higher calorie meal, like for instance, if I am trying to, like if I'm in a fat loss phase or really trying to, you know, navigate hunger, and we go and get Jimmy John's and I get, you know, my chicken Caesar wrap might be 700 calories. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll eat half and then in an hour eat the other half. I'm still going to eat the whole thing.
Smart.
I'm definitely still eating the whole thing. But if I space it out just a little bit longer, I notice that my hunger isn't quite as bad.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really smart strategy for encouraging yourself to eat more slowly. I mean, I know this is a very drastic form of eating slowly.
Right. But, definitely.
I mean, you give your body time to send those fullness signals, you know? So yeah, it's a really good strategy. Next up, we are going to be talking about exercise and physical activity. What's one of the most common things when people lose weight? What is one of the most common things that happen? In my book, they sign up for a 5K.
Yeah.
I mean,
sure.
really, like how common is that?
Yeah. You definitely hear the sentiment of like, if you want to lose weight, you do cardio.
Run. Yeah, you go for a run, and especially 5K, 10Ks, they're becoming more common. I'm not trying to bash runners or anything like that.
Yeah, if you are into a 5K or 10K, you want to sign up. If that's a goal, like you
That's
should do that.
a great goal.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially just for cardio health. But we are talking about hunger management here. We're talking about fat loss here. So let's focus on that specifically. Again, yeah, not bashing running at all. But a lot of people they set some kind of goal, or they set, I'm going to, 3 months from now, I'm doing the couch to 5K, which I think is a great platform, great program. I think it's really, really cool that they have that set up. But that might not be as helpful as one would think. So Herman Poncer is a researcher who has spent his, I'm going to say life. I don't know his early life, but he has spent his professional career, at least, looking at human metabolism. And this is like the guy in human metabolism. And in 2016, he came out with a study titled, oh my gosh, where is it? I thought I had it right here. Just one second. Okay, sorry about that. So in 2016, he came out with a study titled Constrained Total Energy Expenditure and Metabolic Adaptation to Physical Activity in Adult Humans. So there was, let me try to make the constrained energy model as succinct as possible. And I was actually I was teaching this to you in the car the other day on the way down to Detroit. And so the constrained energy model states that if we are in an energy deficit, I don't even need to say that. Let's restart. The constrained energy model states that there is a diminishing returns to the amount of increase to our total daily energy expenditure. So when we're looking at, I'm trying to think of like the most succinct way that I can put this, but I guess I'm just going to have to ramble and the audience is going to have to hang on for dear life. Let's go for it. So your total daily energy expenditure is made up of 4 parts. There is your basal metabolic rate. There is your thermic effect of food, which is, you should know what thermic effect of food is by now if you're listening. There is your energy activity thermogenesis, which is the calories that you burn or the energy you burn from exercise. And then there is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is the energy that you burn from any movement or exercise that is not planned exercise, like lifting weights or going for a run. So this could be stuff NEAT, N-E-A-T, is, walking around the grocery store, doing the dishes, me moving my hands around right now, tapping my foot, anything like that is not planned exercise, but is still categorized as movement. So this is very variable. So let's look at EAT, which is exercise activity thermogenesis. So the exercise that you, or the calories that you burn from planned exercise. Now, if we were to, let's say I go to a lab and I hop on a bike or a treadmill or something like that, and researchers are like, okay, we are going to have you run or bike to the point where you burn 100 calories. And let's say my baseline total daily energy expenditure is 2,000 calories, roughly. Let's just say it's in a vacuum, very clean number, 2,000 calories per day. If I do 100 calories of exercise, what would my total daily energy expenditure be? This isn't a trick question. What would you think it is?
I'm sorry, you have to repeat that.
How are you not listening? You're
right I was listening, but then.
Okay, we're gonna call that pregnancy brain, and I'm gonna let it slide.
Yeah.
I will answer for the audience because they are screaming the answer right now. It's 2,100, Maddie. It's 2,100. 2,000 plus 100. It's 2,100. So yeah, we're gonna give Maddie a pass because she's pregnant.
Once you start throwing numbers, sometimes my brain is like, I can't help it right now.
It's okay. So yeah, 2,100 calories is what you would expect because 2,000 baseline. You add 100 calories of energy expenditure. Okay, 2,100 calories. Herman Poncer has pushed back on this and said that the body has a constrained amount of energy, or the constrained energy model theory. He has put forth a theory that models that the body will downregulate your energy expenditure in other areas and other parts of the day, largely through reductions in NEAT, or non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And this makes sense. Think about the last time that you went for a run or an intense group class, and the rest of the day you're just kind of sitting down a little bit more. Maybe you're a little bit less lively. Maybe you are, even things like leaning against a wall or against the back of a couch, and you're not holding yourself up as much as, you're leaning on things to help prevent the energy it takes literally just to stand there. And so this constrained energy model theory is very likely what is happening when people try to increase their calorie expenditure through exercise alone. There will still be an increase in energy expenditure. It just won't be as much as you think. So instead of increasing your energy expenditure by, let's say, 100, for example, maybe it increases your total daily energy expenditure by 80 or 60 or 50, and there will be diminishing returns. So the more that you do, the less you're getting out of it. So, for somebody who's like, I'm going to try to run a marathon every day to lose weight, you will burn a ridiculous amount of energy doing that. I mean, that would just be insane, but it just might not be as helpful as you might think. Dr. Ponser said in this article, and I quote, "Activity intensity may also play a signaling role given the positive and negative effects of sedentary and vigorous activity bouts, respectively, on total daily energy expenditure. Activity intensity could potentially modulate activity energy expenditure via its effects on fatigue, for example, by promoting postural behaviors that save energy. Example given, sitting instead of standing, or via myokine signaling." And so it sounds really fancy, but all that is to say here is if you do higher intensity exercise, there may be a larger degree of compensation. And so that leads us very, very, I don't want to skip ahead too much, but it's why we prioritize, a lot of us will prioritize steps. Because just walking is a very low intensity that has very likely a very little degree of energy compensation. So it's just it's an easy thing to do. You don't have to go, get a special outfit on. You can easily just pace around every 30 minutes, maybe walk for 2 to 3 minutes, and that'll add up significantly throughout the day. Not to mention, somebody like a construction worker or a waitress or a teacher, they can just kind of walk around as they're doing stuff, pace around a little bit. I mean, in this, a lot of those people, they have to be walking.
Sure.
A waitress isn't going to be able to do her job much if she's...
It'd be pretty tough to be a sedentary waitress.
It would be very tough to do that. Yeah. Unless you're at a dying restaurant, in which case I'm very sorry to hear that. And I hope things turn around. Okay. So not only that, but exercise also has a role on hunger. And a study from 2017 titled "Homeostatic and Non-Homeostatic Appetite Control Along the Spectrum of Physical Activity Levels: An Updated Perspective" they saw that sedentary behaviors, people who were very non-active, had dysregulated appetite. And so somebody who moves very little, but then starts to do just a little bit of exercise, doesn't have to be anything dramatic, will actually start to regulate their appetite, and they'll be able to move themselves into an energy deficit strictly because their hunger is not dysregulated anymore without that much effort. They don't have to go through anything crazy. So if you are somebody who has been sedentary, you might be able to, and you're like, wow, my hunger is just out of whack. Start going on a daily WALK. I can't say it because my dog is in the room, and he'll get really perked up and really excited. But if you start going on a daily WALK, just a little bit, nothing crazy, you might notice that you are less hungry because of that. So very interesting there. Now, the concept of NEAT, or non-exercise activity thermogenesis, cannot be overstated. This is one of the most important things. It is the most variable in terms of total daily energy expenditure. Your basal metabolic rate, which is like your baseline energy expenditure, the energy it takes to keep us alive, that's probably going to be about 60%, roughly. Maybe 50, maybe 60. Could be more if you're very sedentary. Exercise activity thermogenesis, the amount of calories or energy you burn from exercise, it's not that much. People overestimate this, but it's not that much. And by the way, your wristwatch, your Apple Watch, your Fitbit, whatever it is, your Garmin, it's not accurate. So don't rely on it. So if you're like, oh, normally I have to eat 1,500 calories, but today I did a very hard workout and my watch says I burned 600 calories, so I can eat up to 2,100. That is not true. These things there have been studies on this. They are very inaccurate. A lot of times they're overestimating. So please don't trust in that.
Right.
And a lot of times your calorie target has your exercise baked in.
Yeah.
So don't add it. Don't add calories back. I think MyFitnessPal, they might subtract it, or like they might add it in. So if you are, first off, don't use MyFitnessPal. It's a terrible app. If you're looking for a better macro or calorie tracker, macro tracker, Macro Factor, is the gold standard. It's paid for, but I use code Alex. You get a 2-week free trial. And then a free one is Chronometer. And that one's significantly better than MyFitnessPal. MyFitnessPal is terrible. Never use MyFitnessPal. It's terrible. Yeah. So NEAT cannot be overstated, and just like do things that are simple. You don't have to do anything crazy. Like, you can pace around your house. You can, you could get a walking pad for when you work. This one is a game changer.
I have a random question. Speaking of walking pads, at what point is it no longer a need? Like, if you are intentionally using a walking pad, is that now planned exercise?
I mean, that's a great question. I don't think there's a firm distinction on that.
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, it kind of is what it is.
If you go over 14 minutes, it's
but
your body's onto you then.
Interesting thought that popped into my head. But I guess it doesn't like really matter. But
but I get it. Yeah, good distinction. All right. Yeah, NEAT, very important. Just try to increase your step count. Again, there are diminishing returns to any kind of exercise, whether it's planned, not unplanned. Somebody who's walking 2,000 and they go to 8,000 steps a day will have a very significant increase in their energy expenditure. But somebody who goes from 8,000 to 14,000, it will not be as linearly. There won't be a linear increase in energy expenditure because our body will compensate a little bit. Again, going back to the constrained energy model. Thank you, Dr. Bonser. Setting realistic expectations is also extremely important. So there are 2 parts to this. First, you need to set a realistic timeline for fat loss. And this is one of the things that people cannot wrap their heads around in my coaching experience is how long did it take you to, let's say we walk into the woods.
Okay.
There's a forest in front of us and we walk for 10 minutes and we are going to walk the exact same speed in and out. If we walked in for 10 minutes, this is not a trick question. Please hang with me here. You can do this math. You can do this math.
I'm with you.
You already know where I'm going with this. How long, if we turn around, how long will it take us to get out?
10 minutes.
I'm so happy that you got that right. If you were like 9 minutes, 50 seconds, I'd be like, what? Exactly.
I'm doing my best.
You're nailing it. No, you're doing great. So 10 minutes. And so I just like this analogy that however long it took you to gain the weight, expect that long to lose it. So if it took you 3 years to gain the weight, I'm not saying, yes, it'll take 3 years because you were probably gaining weight. Most people gain weight very, very, very slowly unless they went through something extremely traumatic, in which case you need to talk to a therapist, not a personal trainer. I mean, it's just the reality. Yeah. Maybe both.
Sure.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Physical healing and mental healing and emotional healing, they can go hand in hand.
Certainly.
But both require the effort of a professional.
Yeah.
All right. So it's really important that you don't set yourself up for like false expectations. So a great rate of fat loss or a weight loss would be like 0.5% to 1% of your body weight per week. And 1% is not this thing of like, oh, that sounds easy. I bet I can do more. I bet you can't. I legitimately bet you can't. 1%,
it gets tough.
1% is so much harder than people give it credit for.
Yeah.
People see somebody like me losing about 1% body weight per week and they think, he did it, so can I. And I'm not saying you can or you can't, but that's because I have years of experience doing very dedicated fat loss phases. I know every trick in the book and I'm implementing every single one of them.
And this is also, we have more time to dedicate to this.
We don't have kids yet. One's on the way. And I bet fat loss phase will be a lot harder when that time comes.
And that's not to say that like, oh, if you're busy and have things going on, you can't do it. Like, that's not it.
Just dial back your expectations.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I also think that this is a great time to say, if you are in a fat loss phase and you are dealing with intense amounts of hunger and you can't, and you've tried out strategies and you're not really able to kind of regulate that or manage that, you might be going a little too fast.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it's day 1 and you're like, I'm starving, this is impossible, give it a little time. But I think that can be a really great time to kind of reflect and say like, oh, maybe I'm going a little too fast. Maybe if I'm at that like 0.75 rate of weight loss, maybe I can dial it back. And honestly, if you're at 0.5% and you're still feeling like this is unmanageable, it's okay to go even slower. Like, you don't have to. There's no magic percentage that you have to hit.
No. And actually, if you go slower, you are going to be at a higher likelihood of gaining muscle mass and a lower likelihood of losing muscle mass. So going slower could be a very smart recommendation. The only The only downside that I personally see of going slower is people could lose that drive, that motivation. Now, you still need to be realistic with this. You may have false expectations and be like, I need to lose 10 pounds in 3 weeks. No, good luck. Chop off a leg. Chop off an arm, because it's not happening. You know, you could lose that much water weight in 3 weeks, but losing that much body fat, but like that water weight will just come back.
Yeah.
That water weight will just come back. So, you know, you need to be realistic with your timeline, and a realistic, like, so we're saying like these percentages, and I think that's very difficult because people aren't, you know, always looking at, you know, percentages of weight loss per week, and they're not taking this long-term approach without the help of a coach. But you know, let's say 0 calorie deficit is maintenance, obviously.
Yep.
A 300 calorie deficit, that could be a great starting point for a lot of people if you are okay with taking a slightly longer term approach. And if you want to go a little bit faster, if you have more weight to lose, you can go a little bit faster and maybe go up to 500 calorie deficit. You know, that's like the most common number that's thrown out, is like, oh, just jump into a 500 calorie deficit. But for some people, if they're kind of sedentary, or if they are thinner people, like let's say somebody who's 130, 140 pounds, something like that, but they just want to lose 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pounds, something like that, a 500 calorie deficit might be very significant, and that may be way too much for them.
Yeah.
Because again, it's just hunger that we're fighting against. I mean, unless you are doing any kind of crash diet, I wouldn't worry about, you know, going too fast within reason. Like, but hunger is one that you're going to fight against it. If you go too fast, and it'll be hard to sustain. Yeah.
I think a lot of those numbers, it kind of comes back to what's your maintenance.
Yeah.
You know, if you're maintaining at 16 or 1700, that's totally fine. Like, you know, that's what it is. But that 500 calorie deficit at 1600 calories,
brutal,
going down to 1100, that's going to be brutal, really tough to manage hunger.
Might be more worth your time to go to like 1,500 calories, a very small deficit, and then just try walking a little bit more per day.
Yeah.
And lift weights, and just focus on changing your body composition in that way, gaining muscle and losing body fat at the same time, albeit kind of slowly.
Sure.
But you have to take this longer term approach, because if you are thinking, nope, I'm going to get in, I'm going to get out, it's going to be a 3-week thing, 4-week thing, 5-week thing, and you have a lot to lose, you're setting yourself up for failure. Don't do that.
Yeah.
It's like if your kid was like, I'm starting basketball tomorrow, and if in 6 weeks I am not LeBron James, I will quit basketball forever. That is how so many people approach fat loss phases.
Right.
It's like, nope, it didn't work for me, so I guess I'm done. Guess I'm just going to give it up.
Yeah. All of this kind of to say that, like, when you go through your reflections of, you know, like, am I on track? Am I enjoying this? Like, is this sustainable? I would use hunger as a metric.
Yes.
To kind of pay attention to.
Metric. Yeah. All right. And then the other thing is, as far as setting realistic expectations go, you need to accept hunger as a reality. Hunger is going to be there because your body is using stored energy as fuel. It is basically eating itself. I know that's kind of a dramatic way of saying it,
but I mean,
but that's the reality.
The principle's there.
Yes, you're using stored fuel, which is body fat. And so you are going to be hungry. You don't want to be aggressively hungry, but you are going to be a little bit hungry, and that's okay. Hunger is not, one, like I said, it's not linear, and two, it is not necessarily a problem you need to solve. If you are chronically hungry, that's an issue. If you are viciously hungry, that is an issue. But if you are just like a little bit hungry from time to time, that is normal, that is expected, that is the reality. Deal with it and move on. Next up, let's talk about social situations and eating out. And I actually want you to handle this part, because I think you have a pretty good handle on how to navigate this stuff.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That's so sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think when you're going out, there's a couple things to kind of consider. And it's, you know, have you planned ahead of time for your day? Are you kind of allowing yourself, like, I'm going to eat whatever I want? Is this kind of a free for all? Or is this something where you're going in with a plan? You've looked at your menu ahead of time. I wasn't scooched in enough.
No.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. But yeah, so you kind of want to ask yourself those questions. And I'm not saying that when you go out to eat, you have to get a big salad and that can be your only dinner. Like, you can enjoy a burger or whatever, you know. I don't think there's anything super specific there. I think a really big one that people hate to hear, sticking to your fat loss goal while you go out, is cutting back your alcohol.
Yep.
Or not enjoying liquid calories.
Yep. The mimosas that you're doing at brunch, that is not helping things.
Yeah.
The alcohol,
even if you're not doing alcohol, the lemonade you get.
Yeah. 3, 4, 500 calories.
It can be pretty high calorie.
It can be extremely high calorie. So just go with a diet soda.
Yeah.
Get a, you know.
And that's not a fun one. You know, people want to go out and they want to get their little drink, and I totally get it. But that is one of the first things that I don't want to say has to go, but kind of has to go when you're in like a really strict situation.
A few weeks ago, I posted a video that was like, you know, as a dry January wraps up, I want you to reevaluate your relationship with alcohol. And I guess it really nailed home for a few people, because Forward Forever members in particular have been messaging the group about it. And one of them tagged me in a post, and she said she went out to brunch, and her friend, they go out to brunch, you know, every week, or it's a regular thing for them. And she said this was the first time that she decided, you know, thinking back to my post about maybe, you know, reevaluate your relationship with alcohol. She said this was the first time they had gone out to brunch and she had not gotten a mimosa. She said she just got coffee instead. And I'm pretty sure it was black coffee, but that doesn't really matter for the context of the story.
Sure.
And she said one of the things that I had said in my video really rang true for her. And that is, your friends don't care. Your friends are not going to judge you for not drinking. And actually, her friend then also did not drink because she didn't. And so I think a lot of this time, it's almost just like this Mexican standoff of like, are you going to drink? Because if you drink, then I'm going to drink. And if I drink, then you're going to drink. And it's like one of you has to make the first move of putting your guns down and just being like, hey, I'm not going to drink today. And I bet, not a strong bet, because it's going to depend on the person.
Sure.
Some friends will be like, I kind of wanted to drink. But other friends might be like, man, that's actually really nice. I didn't really feel like it, but that's kind of been like the routine or the habit that we've always done. And so I figured that's what we have to do. And so, you know, if this is you, listener, then maybe you should try being that friend of, you're not pressuring your friend. You wouldn't care if they didn't drink.
Right.
And so think about that vice versa. You know, they probably won't care if you don't drink either.
Yes. And the other day a couple months ago, I went out to lunch with a friend, and you know, this is the first time I actually had hung out with this person or gone out to a restaurant with them. And she was like, oh, are you going to get a drink? And I was like, oh, I actually don't drink. I was very upfront, you know, and I'm not saying that I like absolutely never, you know, but day to day, I don't drink. And this sparked such a long conversation. She was so curious because this is something that had been like weighing on her of like, you know, alcohol doesn't really serve me. I don't really enjoy it, but it's such a normalized thing. And she was like, you know, so I think this is kind of
those
tangent.
light bulbs. No, I think those light bulbs are going to start going off on people's heads over the next few months and years. And especially if, you know, if the listeners here can kind of be a spark for that. Again, I'm not saying you do or don't, you don't have to not drink or, you know, something like that. But
I think it's also just being mindful of the amount that you drink. Yeah. So, you know, if you decide you want to have one, go from there.
I said this to Matti the other day. We had a long car ride. We were in the car together for 5.5 hours, I think. Total. So I said to her, if people knew how bad alcohol was for them, I think rates of alcohol consumption would plummet drastically. I think if every single person, it's just like the messaging, you know, we see Bud Light commercials and they're always so funny and they're fun to watch. And it's like every situation, it's like, oh, it could be made better by alcohol. But if people knew how actually devastating it is on their health and that it is contributing to so many major more causes of death.
Sure.
I don't think it would be, and you know, we have this messaging around tobacco and cigarettes that we didn't have, you know, 30, 40 years ago, maybe 50 years ago. And now it's like, you know, fast forward 50 years or so, it's like people are not smoking cigarettes to nearly the same degree as they were back then. I think it depends, you know, there's a lot of money in alcohol, but it also should say something that a lot of these alcohol companies are coming out with non-alcohol. Yeah. They're coming out with these, you know, non-alcoholic seltzers, and
there's definitely a push.
There is a push. And I think the younger generations are kind of waking up to like, hey, alcohol doesn't fit within my lifestyle as much. And, you know, I'm not just trying to say like, oh, the older generations are just, you know, not, you know, paying attention to that. I think it's just easier when you haven't had those habits locked into you and your friend groups and your familial groups as much, then it's a little bit easier to make those changes. But anyway, we're really getting on a tangent here.
Going back to social situations and eating out, one thing that I think is really overlooked is get a side of some sort of vegetable.
So true.
Some sort of fiber. You know, if you go to a restaurant and you get a burger and fries, you're you're not going to get much fiber from that.
Nope.
Maybe add on a side of broccoli or whatever. I think that can go a really long way. That's kind of one that's overlooked.
Yeah, add, not subtract. You
Yes.
don't have to deprive yourself. You
Right.
can always just add in a higher satiety food item. Yeah.
If you are looking for alternatives, if you're looking for, swaps and things,
Grilled, not fried.
Yeah, I was going to say if you, normally do breaded chicken tenders, maybe opt for grilled chicken that time. But, at the end of the day, I think it's really important.
Lower calorie dressings is a big one.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're like vinaigrettes instead of your like cream based ranches.
Ranch.
And such.
I love ranch, man.
But yeah, so all of that to say, like, you can absolutely still enjoy the foods that you want to have out at the restaurant. I think there are just a couple key areas to kind of be mindful of. And for me personally, that's, making sure I'm hitting some sort of fiber, some sort of vegetable, and to limiting those liquid calories. I want to say, like, it is inevitable. When you go to a restaurant, they are there to make the food taste good.
Yep.
You're going to have a lot of butter and oil in that food.
Yeah.
That is what it is.
Yep.
Like, I'm not the chef.
No, the chef's job is to make things delicious.
Yes, they are not concerned about
calories.
They're not concerned about your macro targets.
He wants you to come back because that's the best food you've ever eaten.
Yes, yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that.
That dude's good at his job.
Right.
I mean, food can still be joy. Food should still be joy and community. And it's not just like, oh, this numbers game. It's so much more than that. But the reality is that if you are in a fat loss phase, that is a numbers game. And you have to be comfortable with that reality.
Definitely. And I think, kind of tying it back to this whole, managing hunger thing. One, I think having a strategy for the day before is a really solid one. And two, this is totally dependent on you personally. If you are someone who does better, splitting that meal in half, take home leftovers, spend a little bit more time eating that food if if that's something that works for you.
Yeah, agreed. All right, let's talk about some supplements and fat loss aids. So this one won't really be that lengthy because, I'm sure people are perking up like, oh, what can I take to help me? And the reality is not that much. So fat burners, not worth the money and or potential downside. So these are overpriced and more importantly, can come with a very long list of potential adverse effects. So two common ingredients, and there are a lot of common ingredients, there are a lot of overlap, but I'm just going to pick out two. And the first one is P-synephrine. And this is a less potent version of ephedrine, which is illegal in the United States of America due to several adverse effects. So the benefits of it are less pronounced. It's less potent, but so are the adverse effects are less potent. Either way, I don't think it's worth it, for a mild degree of potentially energy expenditure increase or potentially hunger suppressant. I don't think it's worth it. And the other very, very common ingredient is yohimbine. Now, this has a notable effect on anxiety, increasing anxiety, I should say. I should make that note. Increasing anxiety. If you are trying to mitigate hunger by like 1% and the cost is a 30% increase, and these are made up numbers.
Sure, right.
But let's just use this for an illustrative example. The cost of that is a 30% increase on anxiety. Dude, what are we doing? What are we doing?
Yeah.
That's not worth it. It also has some drug interactions. So if you have a prescription med and you're taking a fat burner, I would run that by your doctor or especially your pharmacist.
Yeah.
There are so many drug interactions with different enzymes that it would be impossible for a doctor or even a pharmacist to know all of them. But there are, interestingly enough, there's software that the pharmacist will put in all these different things, and then the software will say like, oh no, this has conflicting. A common one is, what is it? Is it grapefruit? Grapefruit that you shouldn't be eating unless because that
there are a lot of medications. Yeah. I think there are also like public access ones, like websites and things that will do the same thing.
Still,
I would definitely talk to a doctor because it's confusing.
Yeah. Yohimbine, also fun fact for the people who have taken fat burners with this, can cause random erections. So that could be either a really, really net negative if you are doing group fitness and you're going to your CrossFit class or whatever, and you're popping this fat burner pill and, all of a sudden, whoa, what's going on with John over there? John's very excited about these weights. And alternatively, this could be a massive upside.
Yeah, it could really go either way.
Yeah, either way. But for the guy, it could be very distracting having random erections due to the fat burner pill. And not only the random erections, but he's now more anxious.
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah, because of it, because of the yohimbine. So all this to say that a lot of these ingredients, they may have a very mild effect on hunger suppressant. They might have a very mild effect on energy expenditure, but they aren't studied enough that I would ever recommend these.
Yeah.
And actually, because we know there are adverse effects for a very moderate, I'm not going to say moderate. I'm going to say very, very small upside. I just can't say that I would ever recommend this. And honestly, Maddie didn't want to say this. She asked me if it would be okay to say this before we hopped on this podcast. I judge supplement companies very harshly that sell fat burners and other products that have a very high, look, they make a lot of money. The profit margins on these are disgustingly high. The profit margins on creatine and protein powders, not that high. But the capsules, the pills, those have a very high profit margin.
Yeah.
And so from a capitalist perspective, I understand it, but from a human perspective, I think it is disgusting.
I think it is scummy.
I think it is shameful because they only talk about the upside. They don't talk about, hey, you might have random erections. Hey, you might have increased anxiety. Mm-hmm. Hey, all these things have not been studied well enough to guarantee that hey, there are random drug interactions. They don't talk about this. They just say fat burner. If you want to increase I think that is one of the shadiest things a supplement company can do. Danielle and I were looking at getting into creating our own supplement line and finding out that, okay, protein and creatine, not great profit margins. So the amount that we'd have to sell, the volume we'd have to sell, just ridiculous. It would be this multi-year process to ever turn a profit. And even then it's unknown. But hey, you could, if you sell fat burners, if you sell these capsules that are kind of sketchy, you could make a big profit. It was immediately a no from me. I
think it's such a scummy thing to promote.
I agree.
And yeah, I think it's one of those products that really
it preys
on your insecurities.
Yes, 100%.
And I think that is
shameful.
Nasty.
I agree.
Yeah, I feel very strongly about this. Too. I don't, if I see, Now,
caffeine, on the other hand, this might have an effect on hunger suppression, and then it does have a small effect on energy expenditure. So caffeine is one that, take it in moderation. Don't be crazy about it.
Yes.
It's very easy to get carried away with this. There are, and this is a common ingredient in fat burners, but you can also you could drink coffee, you could drink tea, you don't need to spend a ton of money on fat burners to get this one thing, which is caffeine. And oftentimes they could be pumped with way too much caffeine. I saw this one article that had this fat burner that had, you won't even believe how much caffeine it had.
Oh God.
1,000 milligrams.
That's dangerous. I'm surprised that's legal.
I don't know how.
Yeah. I mean the Panera thing.
They're not evaluated by the FDA. So they could do whatever they want, basically.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be illegal though. For reference, a cup of coffee has between 80 and 120 milligrams of caffeine, kind of depending. Starbucks, some of their coffees might be 200, 300, 400, depending on the size, depending on the coffee. The Panera lemonade, what was it called?
The charged lemonade.
Charged lemonade had caffeine in them. How much was it? Do you remember?
Was like $3.40 each, but the big issue was that people could get free refills.
Yeah.
So
somebody passed away.
I think even 2 people maybe.
Oh my gosh.
Don't quote me on that. But all of this to say, be mindful of your caffeine intake.
Talked about enough. I mean, it's such a widely. It's the number one most used drug on the planet.
Yes, and the number of times, like if you look at a canister of coffee or your Keurig pods, it won't even tell you the caffeine content.
The caffeine content.
Yeah, this is something that I discovered recently. Like once I got pregnant, and you kind of really have to watch your caffeine intake. Yeah, they won't tell you.
Right. And so just for like a good, reference, 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of 3 to 6 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram of body weight is where peak ergogenic benefits happen for like exercise. So I personally wouldn't say like start at the high end of that. I would say start below the lower end of that.
Sure.
You don't need to go. So for example, if somebody's like, wait, how many kilograms in a pound? There are 2.2 pounds per kilo. So I am about 165 pounds or about 75 kilos, like roughly. And so for me, I mean, doing, let's see, 225. So 225 to 450 milligrams of caffeine. 450 milligrams of caffeine, that's too much for me. 300 and I'm cruising. Cruising.
Yeah. That's also one thing to note, a lot of those energy drinks, a lot of those will be between 2 and 300.
It's very standard. Yeah. But those always say the caffeine content on them. I've never seen one that doesn't have that.
Which I think is so solid.
Yeah. And just a quick note on caffeine. Don't drink it after noon. Afternoon, it has an average half-life of 6 hours. So 6 hours later, you're still going to have half of the caffeine content in your bloodstream. And maybe you don't notice it impacting your time to fall asleep, but it will impact your sleep quality in a negative way. And it's just this vicious negative feedback loop that's like, okay, I drink caffeine at, let's say 5 p.m. or a pre-workout at 5 p.m. Pre-workouts are notoriously high in caffeine. It's insane. Yeah. So they, after work, take my caffeine, take my pre-workout, whatever it is, and then go work out, get my workout done. And then it's 10 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m. Let's say you had 300 milligrams of caffeine at 5 p.m. It's 11 p.m. You still got 150 milligrams going through your blood. The next day you wake up, you're like, wow, I don't know why. I mean, I slept 7-8 hours, but I feel so tired. I need to have some coffee. And so it's like this continuous feedback loop that is just crushing you. So I strongly, strongly urge you to prioritize your sleep. And one of the easiest ways to do that is just cut off caffeine intake before noon or before 11 a.m. The earlier you can make that cutoff, probably the better. And that 6-hour half-life, that's not a golden rule for everybody. Some people actually process it a little bit slower, break it down a little bit slower. So it could be a longer half-life than that. All right. Anything else to say here? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
All right. Let's get into practical tips. So this is probably what most listeners came for because this was the title of the episode. We kind of did a honeypot situation on them. If you're unfamiliar with that, I love that phrase. But anyway, so practical tips. First, before I go with these, don't feel like you need to implement all of these. Pick one, pick two, see if they work. If not, adjust. Maybe adjust the degree of it. Maybe try a new strategy. But let's go through these 7. And yeah. So first, number 1, slow down. Slow down. And I wanted to say that very slowly because 1, it was applicable, but 2, I want this to be the number 1 thing that's nailed in people's brains.
Yeah.
This is the cheat code. This is the cheat code.
And
if
this is
you can, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're totally fine.
I'm on a roll. Slow down. Put it on a sticky note. Set it, put it. I actually did this a lot with my one-on-one clients. Write it down on a sticky note and set it somewhere that you eat consistently. Maybe it's your dining room table. Maybe it's your kitchen counter. Maybe it is your refrigerator or your pantry. Put this anywhere where you consistently eat. Maybe it's at your desk at work. I don't care where it is. You need to slow down. Write it in permanent marker on your Tupperware. Put it everywhere you can. You need to slow down. And it is such a hard thing to, we're trying to do so much. We got to go faster. We got to do more work. We got to go take care of that. We got to go take care of the kids, the baby, the dogs, whatever it is. And so we just scarf down food because we need to eat the food and then we need to move on with our day. Okay, take a deep breath. You need to slow down. There are a few reasons that you want to do this, but just increase the time to enjoy the food, enjoy the flavors. 1, it improves the memory of that meal. That is very important. This has been studied. I didn't pull a study reference for this, but this has been studied that if you can increase the amount of time it took to eat a meal, you will increase the memory of that meal, and that will improve your satiety throughout the day. And the other part of this is it gives more time for satiety signals to kick in. And this is so important because if we can get through, like, let's say we have a plate of nachos in front of us, and if we're eating very fast, we could muck that whole thing. I say muck. That's a word I use sometimes, which means like eat it very quickly. Yeah. Like sometimes I'll say like I muck that bowl of ice cream or something like that, Yeah. It's just a word that I say. I don't know. And so, yeah, slow it down. Give your body time for the satiety signals to kick in. Okay, you were going to say something on this, but then I got really carried away. Do you remember it?
Yeah, I was just going to say this is probably the easiest of the tips to implement. Not that any of these are like huge, things, but this is one that
everybody can and should be doing.
Yes. Yeah. This is one that I'm really bad about.
Yeah. I often look over at you and like tap you on the shoulder and say, slow it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because a lot of people, they will, like let's say it's a fork or, we'll use a fork example.
Sure.
They stab a few pieces with their little spear and then they put it in their mouth and they chew. And then as they're chewing, they are already queuing up the next bite.
Yeah.
Don't do that. I can't believe I'm giving a guide on how to eat to our audience who are mostly adults, but stab your food with your fork, put it in your mouth, put the fork down.
Yeah.
Chew. Keep that fork down. Don't touch it. Maybe just as you're chewing, look around, look at what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe take a breath. Chew twice as much as you think, and that's actually, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but take a sip of water. Just increase the total time that it takes to eat a meal, and you will probably, if people did nothing else but this one thing, I bet they would lose weight.
Yeah, this is a really solid one.
This is a very solid one. Actually, not only that, but it also improves digestion. It actually increases, there was a study in elderly people that having them chew more increased their rates of muscle protein synthesis, because the protein that they were eating, the first part of digestion is the mechanical digestion, the breaking it down with our teeth. And by chewing it down more, their body was able to absorb more of the protein. So that's a benefit. And then also it can reduce your degree of bloating. And so a lot of people, like Matti, deal with degrees of bloating if they eat too fast, or different reasons that we don't need to go into, like too much fiber in one meal, for example. But eating slowly, if somebody was dealing with bloating, that would be probably my first tip, along with drinking more water. But eating slowly would be number one. And then we would look at fiber. But anyway. Okay. Number 2, chew twice as much as you think. And this goes along with the number 1, which was slow down. But chew twice as much as you think. Again, increases your digestion, improves your digestion, I should say. You might get better muscle growth because of it. I mean, that's sensational. That's a big win. But I do think I kind of covered this one already a little bit in the last point. So I'm going to move on to the next one. 3, drink a glass of water before a meal. This is not a tip I would recommend for those who had gastric sleeve surgery, but if they have, I'm sure they've been educated on that because they fill up so fast. But a lot of these tips, I mean, if you have gastric sleeve surgery, you need to be talking with a professional, not like listening to, this podcast.
Well, you could still listen.
Yeah, you could still listen. That's true. Oh my gosh. Can you imagine the number of listeners that I just scared away?
Like, you could still listen.
Like, oh man, I'm going to have to unfollow this podcast now.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Please stay followed. We need every number we can get. Drink a glass of water before a meal. So this can actually help, 1, increase the volume in your stomach. And we do have stretch receptors in our stomach that can contribute to that fullness feeling or that satiety feeling. So this can be really good. It also starts that satiety signaling process. It is a form of slowing down. You're increasing your window of eating, although it's kind of a weird way to do it. But I would say definitely drinking a glass of water before a meal and then refilling it and just drinking it as you go. Very good tip. 4, and this could be scoffed at by some people, and I'm totally with that. But number 4 is try to increase sleep. Now, I know for some listeners, you may have young children, you may have a very demanding job. This may be just totally out of the cards. But before you totally write it off, whether you increase your time of sleep, and if that's not possible, try to increase your quality of sleep. And again, we will have a newborn, so I will have an updated perspective on this in like 4 to 6 months.
6 months. Hopefully not 4 months.
6 months. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Maybe 5.
Yeah. 5 to 6 months. I will have an updated perspective on this, but just try to increase your either time of sleep or quality of sleep. So time to sleep, obviously this makes sense. Turn off the Netflix, turn off the TV, just go to bed a little bit earlier. Put your phone away if you find yourself scrolling in bed for half hour. Put the phone in a different room. Put it further away, so you have to actually go up and get it. That's a pretty good strategy. I had somebody do is put your phone on the opposite side of the room. She was having trouble, like, 1, getting to sleep because she was scrolling so much, and then 2, waking up. She would hit the snooze button too many times. So I said, your phone is your alarm? She said, yeah. I said, okay, plug it in on the other side of the room. You have to get up to turn it off then. So,
and once you get out of bed, you might get back in, but
you're just more likely.
There used to be alarm clocks that were on wheels, and they would like move around.
I've seen the ones that are like little pads that you have to step on.
Oh,
yeah. I thought that was pretty good. And it wouldn't be enough. It was like a weight measurement kind of thing. So you couldn't just like push your hand on it. Yeah. I thought that was a pretty good one.
That is good.
Okay. 5, limit stress or find ways to manage it. Obviously there are some stressors that they're just not going away.
Sure.
Our work, kids, you love them, but they are a stressor.
Yeah.
Of course. but things, your mortgage, your rent, whatever it is, those are stressors that are not going away. So you may have to find ways to manage it, or just find ways to kind of reframe your thoughts a little bit. Stress eating is a very, very common thing, and being in a deficit is a stressor. So
Yeah.
that could be something to evaluate. Is this the right time to enter a fat loss phase? And, if you are noticing high degrees of hunger, it sounds a little silly, but finding ways to de-stress could actually help with that a bit. At the very least, it'll reduce your chances of raiding the snack cupboard, because you are just a little stressed and you want that dopamine hit. All right, 6, flexibility with calorie targets. On days where you are extra hungry, don't feel like you have to stay locked into 14 to 56 calories on the money. First off, I always like to give a range of plus minus 100. On days that you're a little bit less hungry, you can eat a little bit less. On days you're a little bit more hungry, you can eat a little bit more. But I think a lot of people would enjoy the freedom of even more flexibility than that. Not everybody, but some people, this really worked well for you.
Yep.
On days you were very hungry, you would eat up to your maintenance. So we knew what your maintenance was. Do you remember what it was? Like 1,800, 1,900, 2,000?
Like right around 2,000.
2,000, yeah. And so in your fat loss targets, let's just say they were 1,500. I don't remember exactly. I think we went a little bit slower than that, but let's just say it was 1,500. You ate anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000. And in 2,000, yes, you're not going to be losing weight. You're eating up toward maintenance, but you were lifting weights. So you are still improving your body composition. You're gaining muscle and losing body fat at the same time, albeit very, very, very slowly. And then on days where you could manage a deficit very easily, we really planned out our meals, we were eating high volume foods, you could be further into a deficit. And I think this could be a very freeing strategy for a lot of people, with the caveat of you need to actually have a good idea of what your maintenance is. Those online calculators are just a starting point. And so, Matti lives with a professional where I'm very good at this. And so I dialed in. Well, actually, we use Macrofactor for you, which dials in your calorie targets, your calorie maintenance and targets for you. But if you don't, you need to have a pretty good handle on finding your calorie maintenance. And, maybe one of the ways to do this, you could do some mathematical, calculations where if you're, gaining or losing at a certain rate, you could kind of divide that by the amount of calories roughly in a pound of body fat or muscle, and the often number that we use is 3,500 calories per pound of body fat. Technically it's a little bit more than that, but muscle also has a different energy storage. Like the amount of calories that are in a pound of muscle is different. So we use 3,500. That's a decent enough number. It's probably closer to 4,200 actually. But anyway, I'm throwing out a lot of numbers, but all this to say, like, eat at a target. Look at how your weekly weight averages are moving over time. Look at your weekly calorie targets, and then make small adjustments. Make adjustments by 50 to 100. You should have a pretty good idea of what your maintenance is. If you're losing by like a quarter pound per week and you're eating at like 1,900 calories, maybe your maintenance is somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,950, 2,000. It's not like it's going to be way higher than that. If you're gaining weight very slowly, then dial back your calories and, just be smart about it. All right, 7. This is our final practical tip. Reduce your energy density. So shoot for higher volume foods. And we talk about this a lot on, in any fat loss thing, we will always talk about volume foods.
Yes.
On social media, we're always talking about high volume foods. So if you were to try to create an example of, 100 calories of M&Ms, it would be like a tiny, tiny, tiny little bowl of M&Ms versus 100 calories of broccoli. That would be, it would be hard to eat that much broccoli.
Yes.
Same with like chips versus blueberries.
Yeah.
Or Oreos versus watermelon. Oreos, 140 calories of Oreos is 2 Oreos. Watermelon, 140 calories of watermelon, you're going to be eating watermelon for an hour. Yeah. Not literally, but a very long time.
Yeah. But also because, if someone wants M&Ms, they're probably not thinking like, oh, I should really have the broccoli instead.
Yeah, right.
So these are kind of random
it's not
comparisons.
This or that. It's like,
but there are some practical ones of like, if you are having a rice-based meal and you have like white rice, maybe cauliflower rice is an option that you can swap to that's going to be a higher value.
Add it in. We would add it in.
We would do a split of like 50-50. Yeah. And that's going to help boost up your food volume.
Yeah.
And that's like a very one-to-one sort of
Absolutely.
swap.
And then, some other swaps that we do are
low-calorie tortillas.
Low-calorie tortillas are a big one. I started incorporating leaner proteins.
Sure.
And so, instead of like an 80-20 for ground beef, we do like a 94-6, 96-4, 90-10, just something we just do whatever's on sale that's like a little bit leaner than normal.
Definitely.
Honestly, we eat a lot less fast food when I'm in a fat loss phase because that there is a very high energy density. There's nothing wrong with fast food. It's just that it is a higher energy density. And so I might be hungrier later in the day. So I notice that if I eat something like Taco Bell or McDonald's or Little Caesars Pizza or something like that, that if I'm not very meticulous about the rest of my eating patterns that day, I'm going to go to bed hungry. Yeah. And that's not good.
That's not a fun feeling.
Like 2 weeks ago, maybe a week ago, I think a week ago, we just had a crazy day and we ate out twice that day. I ate oatmeal for breakfast and then I ate, I think it was Jimmy John's for lunch and then like Little Caesars or something like that. Something like that. At the end of the day, so my maintenance is about 3,000 calories. I was at 3,100 calories. I was still hungry.
Yeah.
I mean, that should tell you how important 3,000 calories, I could be stuffed. There are certain days where it is very difficult for me. And so, because I'm bulking, I actually need to try to incorporate some of these more hyperpalatable foods. These more energy dense foods. Just generally speaking, foods higher in fiber or water are going to be higher volume or lower energy density. So incorporating more of those into your diet can be a very smart strategy for hunger management. Okay. Anything else you want to add on before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. I feel like we covered a lot of the big strategies for this.
Yeah. I think this is going to hit the record as our new longest podcast.
Really?
Yes. No, this was not a new record. And I'm very sorry for nearly deceiving you, audience. This was close to our longest ever, but our longest episode was 1 hour and 46 minutes. And that was episode number 3, How to Optimize Muscle Growth. This one's coming in at about an hour 36 or hour 37. So I suppose I could talk your ear off about some random topic to try to hit a new record, but I think that would be deceitful. And I think a few audience members may feel lied to. And that is the last thing we are trying to do on lowering the barrier. So with that said, you'll have to excuse my lack of awareness and my unpreparedness. I genuinely hope I never make this mistake again. And I hope you'll forgive me and continue to tune in.
I guess it's almost 1.
Yeah, we moved through it pretty quickly. So, wow. All right. Well, thanks everybody so much for listening. One more time, if you want to support us monetarily, the A-Team, Forward Forever. The A-Team is always open for signups, and there's a 7-day free trial, $27 a month, less than $1 a day. Forward Forever. Registration will be open from the time this podcast is dropped until February 18th. And then we start on the 19th. And if you miss this cycle, we do them every 6 weeks. And then if you would like to follow us, you can follow me at AlexTeamyFitness.
Or me at Meals with Matti.
And that is on Instagram. And if you enjoyed this episode, please give us a 5-star rating. And if you would be so kind, screenshot and share on your Instagram story and tag us. We just absolutely love that. It means the world to us. And that's it.
Yep.
All right. Take care, guys.